Welcome back to Unlock, Empower, Transform with Che Blackmon, episode 51. I want to start with a question for you. When was the last time you took an engagement survey at work? And more importantly, did anything actually change afterward? Yeah, I thought so. Here's what happens in most organizations. Around September or October, a survey gets deployed. Employees spend 15 minutes clicking boxes. Maybe they're honest, maybe they're not. Engagement scores come back 3 months later. Leadership looks at the numbers, nods solemnly, and commits to doing better. By the time you see results, the people who were about to leave have already updated their LinkedIn profiles. This episode is about a better way. Not just better, fundamentally different. We're talking about real-time data, passive collection methods that don't require people to stop their work to answer questions, and systems that actually predict when someone's about to disengage before it becomes a crisis. If you've ever wondered why your most talented people seem to disappear suddenly, or why engagement surveys never seem to match your actual culture, this conversation is for you. Let me be direct. The annual engagement survey is the leadership equivalent of checking your bank account once a year. You get a snapshot. Sometimes it's a shock, but it doesn't tell you what happened in the months between checks. The fundamental problem is timing. Engagement is dynamic. It shifts week to week based on project outcomes, management interactions, workload, personal circumstances. An employee could be thriving in January and burned out by March. You won't know until October. By then, they've already decided to leave. There's also what I call the survey response bias. People know they're being evaluated. They might downplay struggles they're having because they're worried about their job security. Or they might vent more aggressively than they actually feel because they're frustrated in the moment. The data you get isn't necessarily what's real. And then there's the interpretation problem. A company does a survey, gets a score, and leadership tries to figure out what it means. Employee engagement is at 67%. Okay, but 67% of what? Is it declining? Do different departments vary? Is this about compensation, management, culture, career development? The survey gives you a number, but not the narrative. I've seen organizations where the engagement score is middle of the road company-wide. But when you break it down by department, one team is thriving while another is actively looking. The aggregate number is hiding the real story. And here's the part that really bothers me. The survey process itself is fatiguing. Employees get surveyed constantly now. Annual engagement survey, pulse survey, exit surveys, project feedback surveys, manager effectiveness surveys. People are tired of being asked questions. The irony is that all this surveying is supposed to help leadership listen better, but it's actually training employees to stop really communicating because they're burned out from formal feedback processes. So we need a different model entirely. Here's what I mean by passive data collection. Gathering insights without interrupting people's work or asking them direct questions. Think about what data already exists in your organization. Email patterns, meeting attendance, collaboration metrics, calendar time allocations, voluntary participation in professional development, retention rates by department, internal transfer requests, help desk tickets, project turnaround times. All of this is data. None of it requires you to deploy a survey. A company, let's say a mid-sized tech firm, realized they could predict which employees were likely to leave by looking at email communication patterns. People who were actively disengaged sent fewer emails, participated less in group conversations, and had less cross-functional collaboration. Not because they were lazy, but because disengagement manifests as withdrawal. That same organization noticed that people who took advantage of professional development opportunities had longer tenure. So instead of asking, "Do you feel invested in your career?" they could look at actual enrollment in development programs. Calendar data tells a story. People who are burning out tend to have packed calendars with little to no break time. People who are managing well have some breathing room. That's not about surveillance. It's pattern recognition on information you already have. Here's the critical piece. Passive data respects privacy. You're not asking people personal questions. You're looking at organizational patterns. The key is being transparent about what you're tracking and why. Employees should understand that you're looking at collaboration patterns to understand team health, not monitoring individual productivity. There's a big difference. Some organizations are also experimenting with opt-in passive data. Employees can choose to share more context, like using sentiment analysis on internal communication platforms, but it's voluntary. And critically, people know exactly what's being measured. The advantage of this approach is real-time insight. You're not waiting for an annual survey. You can see trends as they emerge. If collaboration suddenly drops in a department, you can ask why before people start updating their resumes. And because you're not asking people questions they're tired of answering, you get more authentic data. You're looking at behavior, not self-reported sentiment. Solution number 2, real-time pulse checks that predict patterns. 7:30 to 10:15. Now, passive data is powerful, but it's not the whole picture. You also need active feedback. The difference is how you structure it. Instead of an annual 30-question survey, imagine micro-surveys, real-time pulse checks. 2 or 3 questions deployed strategically that give you insight into what's actually happening. What does this look like? A manager notices a team member has been withdrawn in meetings. Instead of waiting for the annual survey, they might send a quick pulse check. How are you feeling about your workload this week? What's one thing we could adjust? That's not a formal evaluation, it's a conversation starter. Some organizations are using pulse surveys triggered by specific events. After a major project launch, pulse check. How supported do you feel by your team? What would have helped? After a reorganization, how clear are your role and responsibilities? These targeted questions give you data points that connect to actual moments in the employee experience. The benefit is real-time responsiveness. If you discover through a pulse check that people feel unsupported, you can address it immediately. You're not waiting 8 months. Real-time data also helps you predict disengagement patterns before they become crises. There's usually a pattern before someone leaves. Their participation in optional activities drops. They stop volunteering for projects. They have fewer one-on-ones or shorter conversations. Their engagement scores on pulse checks decline gradually. If you're tracking these in real time, you can intervene. Have a conversation. Understand what's happening. Maybe they're dealing with a personal situation. Maybe there's a management issue. Maybe they're not growing like they expected to. But you catch it while you can still do something about it. Some companies are building dashboards where managers can see real-time engagement health for their teams. Not intrusive, just trend data. My team's average pulse score on feeling valued has declined 15 points over the last month. I should check in. That's leadership as it should work. The psychology here is important too. When people see that feedback leads to action, when they give a pulse check and things actually change, they're more likely to keep engaging honestly. When feedback goes into a black hole, people stop giving it. Real-time systems create the possibility of responsiveness, which builds trust, which improves engagement, which is the whole point. Here's where I want to connect this to something deeper. Data-driven engagement isn't about metrics for the sake of metrics. It's about understanding your culture in real time. Your culture isn't what you say it is. It's what your data reveals. If your engagement data shows that women and underrepresented minorities are disengaging faster than other groups, that's not a coincidence. That's your culture telling you something. If your data shows that people in certain departments have dramatically different engagement scores, your culture varies by department. Maybe some managers understand how to create space for people to thrive. Others don't. If your real-time data shows declining engagement right after promotions, something's wrong with your onboarding or role clarity. This is where transformation actually starts, not with guesses, but with data that tells you exactly where culture is breaking down. I'm a DBA candidate researching culture transformation, and one thing I've learned is that you can't fix what you don't see. Most organizations don't see their culture until it's too late. By the time the engagement survey comes back, the damage is done. Real-time granular data lets you see culture as it's actually operating, not as leadership thinks it is, but as employees are experiencing it. And that visibility, that's where you change things. Think of it this way. You can look at your engagement data and see people feel valued when they receive recognition from peers. People feel disconnected when they're siloed by function. People feel supported when their manager has regular one-on-ones. Now you have evidence to build your culture on. You're not guessing. You're responding to what your people are actually telling you through their behavior and feedback. That's high-value leadership. Data-informed decisions about people, culture, and advancement. Let me give you something you can do right now that's going to clarify this entire framework. I call this your data inventory and opportunity map, and it takes about 15 minutes. Part 1. Current data reality. Write down all the data your organization currently collects, not surveys, actual data. Calendar data, email communication, meeting participation, help desk tickets, retention rates, internal transfer requests, training enrollment. Don't worry about whether it's being used well yet, just list what exists. Part 2. Data you're ignoring. Look at your list. Which of those data points could actually tell you something about engagement and culture? For example, if you're tracking training enrollment but not looking at who enrolls, you're missing insight. If you're tracking turnover but not by department or manager, you're missing granularity. Part 3. The gap. What engagement questions do you care about? Are people feeling supported? Do people see opportunity for growth? Are people connected to their team? Now map to what data could actually answer that question. Could you look at professional development participation, peer feedback exchanges, cross-functional collaboration, internal mobility rates? Part 4. Real-time opportunity. Where could you replace your annual survey with real-time pulse checks? Maybe after performance reviews, pulse check. How clear is your path forward? After team offsites, pulse check. How connected do you feel to your team? The transformation here is shifting from we survey to understand engagement to we strategically collect data that tells us what's really happening and allows us to respond in real time. You're building an intelligence system, not a compliance process. I want to connect this back to something I've shared with you before, the SHIELD resilience strategy. When you understand your engagement data in real time, you're actually understanding where people's resilience is being tested. Real-time data tells you when people are withdrawing. That's often a signal that their resilience reserves are depleted. If your data shows declining engagement during high-pressure periods, that's not a problem to fix with an incentive program. That's a signal that people need support, more flexibility, different workload distribution, recovery time. The employees who stay and thrive are those who have resources to manage stress. The SHIELD guide I've created walks through the tools people need: self-awareness, healthy coping, internal resources, external support, learning orientation, and daily practices that sustain them. Your engagement data is actually telling you where those resources are present or absent in your culture. This is where data-driven engagement becomes an act of care. You're not just gathering metrics, you're understanding how to support people better. You're building cultures where people can actually sustain their performance and their well-being together. That's high-value leadership in action. If you're ready to move beyond survey fatigue and into real-time culture intelligence, I want to point you toward deeper work. Grab the SHIELD Resilience Strategy Guide. Download it. Use it to understand yourself first, because the most effective culture leaders are those who understand their own resilience and stress patterns. That foundation matters. Then check out High-Value Leadership, Transforming Organizations Through Purposeful Culture. The framework there walks through how to build cultures intentionally, including how to gather intelligence about what's actually working. And if you want to go deep into the systems and strategies for creating cultures where people thrive, where engagement is naturally high because people feel valued, supported, and challenged, join the waitlist for the High Value Leadership Intensive. We're building the most comprehensive culture transformation system available. This isn't about surveys, it's about actual systemic change. But start with your data inventory. That exercise is going to show you what you already know about your culture that you haven't been looking at. That's the first step. Thank you for being here for episode 51. We're halfway through another week of transformation conversations. On Thursday, we're diving into the forgotten middle, why mid-level leaders are your secret weapon. Because the truth is, your mid-level leaders are where culture transformation actually happens. But before you go, I want to ask you to do two things. First, download the Shield Resilience Strategy Guide, because understanding your own resilience patterns is the foundation for creating cultures where others can thrive. It's in the show notes. Second, comment. Tell me about your experience with engagement surveys. What would real-time data actually solve for you? What's one thing you're going to implement from today? Your insights matter. Your transformation creates possibilities. I'll see you next time on Unlock, Empower, Transform.